Thanks for watching. Don't forget to push the like button, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Tony Witt and Dean Wall Brothers back for season 3. Brought to you by Black Effect Podcast Network and iHeartRadio. We're serving up some real stories and life lessons from people like Bill Lincoln, DC Young Fly, Paul Harmony, and many more.
Hello, how are you? Welcome, welcome. Am I saying your name right? Bad at saying. Hi, Tom. That's me. Good.
Welcome to our podcast. Please be aware the thoughts and opinions expressed by the host are their thoughts and opinions only and do not reflect those of iHeartMedia, iHeartRadio, Coast to Coast AM, employees of Premier Networks, or their sponsors and associates. We would like to encourage you to do your own research and discover the subject matter for yourself.
Get ready to be amazed by the Wizard of Weird. This is Strange Things with Joshua B. Warren.
I am Joshua B. Warren, and each week on this show, I'll be bringing you brand new, mind-blowing content, news, exercises, and weird experiments you can do at home, and a lot more. On this edition of the show, I was trapped with a
How are
dead
you?
human,
Carlos.
and here's what happened. I guess you could say it's sort of like possibly tell this story before here or there. It's one of those stories that I'll just never forget. And I thought of this because,
Thanks for
you
watching.
know, I had
Enjoy
been
Coast to
experimenting
Coast.
recently with my new portal opening device that I intend to use eventually at my property near Area 51.
Good.
And I haven't explained
Don't
how
mind
this
you
device
guys
is intended to
socialize
work,
with each
but it
other.
does involve some chemistry. And I've never been great at chemistry. So I'm having to go back and learn and relearn some things. And this made me think of this story. And eventually you'll see why, how it all connects. When I was in high school, one of my friends introduced me to one of his friends, who was this older guy, and we'll call the older guy Jim. So here I am in my teens, I don't know, probably like maybe 17 or something like that. And Jim was in his 20s. You know, it seems like there are always these guys who, they graduate from high school, and then they want to go back and hang out with high school kids again. You know? So this is what Jim was like. He was the older
Step
guy
on your little gas.
who could buy the beer. And he was really into paranormal and occult stuff. And so when we met, I mean, he was always wanting to go out and investigate stuff. And we became friends. He looked the part, he always wore a long trench coat of Highland Road. And one of the things that was especially notable about Jim is that he worked at a funeral home there in Western North Carolina. That's where I grew up. So he worked at this funeral home, and he worked there for quite a while, and he did a very good job. In fact, another bigger funeral home offered him a job for more pay, and so he took that job. So when he was working at the second funeral home, really quite intense because they would have
To work.
a little.
I'm headed to work in Brigham City. That's where I'm going. Just a little drive and some coast to coast. That's
So I started, since I'm investigating and learning more about criminals and stuff,
My car does not like
exactly how works. Do you know? Well, when we get back from this break, I'm going to tell you what I learned about embalming fluid. And then that led me down the rabbit hole into other interesting chemicals. And then all ties in again to some of the
see that
experiments
on inside my house.
And then
That would
some
suck,
experiments
but better than being freezing cold.
dead bodies. So just bear with me. It's one of those shows. Who knows where it's going to go?
Tell you that,
But this may be the last time you hear me remind you that if you live near Las Vegas, Nevada, we are producing one Paranormal Vegas show 2024. And it's going to be in Boulder City, which is 30 minutes outside of Vegas. It's a 60-minute show. Vegas Ghost and UFO show. It's warm, it's indoors, you get to touch real evidence, take the best selfies. It's going to be for all ages on February the 27th at 7 p.m. And tickets, believe it or not, if you get a ticket right, that's only $9.95. Everybody can afford that. So we're going to sell out very quickly. And you're going to see ghosts, UFOs, monsters, and more. All these haunted and charming items. Go to ParanormalVegas.com, ParanormalVegas.com, and join us. I'm Joshua Peter. You're listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. And I will be right back.
Right in the middle of my windshield.
Hang on, Joshua, I'll be right back.
It seems like there's a lot more cars today than yesterday.
I never really looked into exactly how that supposedly works. And here's what I discovered. When you start reading about it, it actually is quite technical, and so I'm not going to get that deep into it. But basically, embalming chemicals are a variety of preservatives, sanitizing, and disinfectant agents and additives used in modern embalming to temporarily prevent decomposition and restore a natural appearance for viewing a body after death. A mixture of these chemicals is known as embalming fluid and is used to preserve bodies of deceased persons for both funeral purposes and in medical research and anatomical laboratories. The period for which a body is embalmed is dependent on time, expertise of the embalmer, and factors regarding duration of stay and purpose. Now, a lot of you might think that like embalming fluid is the same thing as formaldehyde, but it turns out that's not actually the entire case. It says embalming fluid contains a mixture of formaldehyde, methanol, glutaraldehyde, I don't know how to pronounce that, and other solvents. And basically what they're saying here is that that essentially there's a combination of things, including formaldehyde, that are used in embalming, and that it really just kind of depends on the person and the circumstances. So it's not like there's one substance that's used in every case. But when you start looking into how it works, embalming fluids act to denature cellular proteins, meaning that they cannot act as a nutrient source for bacteria. Basically, what they're saying here, what I've gathered, is, and again, I'm not going to even pretend that I understand the chemistry of all this, but this fluid goes in and it somehow it binds to these amino acids in your body, and it changes the structure of the proteins so that everything becomes more rigid and hesitant, or I guess I should say resistant to bacteria. So it kind of hardens things up so that the bacteria cannot really work on it as well. And it also kills most of the bacteria. So really it's all about just making the proteins and whatnot in the body more resistant to bacteria and killing the bacteria. And that's just sort of how it works. And so, you know, it's wrong, of course, to think about this as some kind of a life-giving substance, but it is a very interesting idea that the bodies can be preserved this way. There's not much more to say about it, really. But I started reading about how that this kind of thing can preserve the appearance of life. And then I started thinking about other substances. Some substances, like the formaldehyde, the embalming fluid, they preserve that appearance of life. But then what about things, other substances you can take that quickly kill you? I was reading about this serial killer recently named Leonard Lake, and he was arrested in the 1980s. And when they took him into the interrogation room, apparently they left him alone for a few minutes. So when they came back in, he's kicking around and violently convulsing on the floor. And they took him to the hospital and he died. Turns out that this guy had sewn cyanide pills into his clothes. And just expecting that one day this would happen, he'd get caught. And so he was able to rip those out and eat those pills and commit suicide right there. And so I, you know, he had a military background, by the way. But I started thinking about, like, well, what is it about cyanide that just so quickly, you know, destroys tissue, kills people or something? Because you always hear about, like, these old spies and stuff. They give them cyanide pills supposedly if they get captured, they don't get tortured. You know, they can do that. So I got online and I started sort of looking up, like, how does cyanide work? And surprisingly, the first thing that pops up when you do that is a bunch of like suicide prevention information. Call now for help, which I found odd because I can't remember hearing of anybody, like a regular person in modern day, deciding to commit suicide by cyanide. But I guess there are people who decide that they want to go that way. And, there's this idea that, well, if you take cyanide like you're captured, then it's going to be, a more peaceful experience. But I found this article that I thought you'd find interesting. Labroots.com, written by Anthony Bouchard. And he says here cyanide is a lethal chemical that was commonly used in suicidal pills throughout World War II to prevent captured spies and high government officials from leaking their country's secrets to the enemy. And he says, although quote, quick and painless death at the time, modern science now shows it was not the case. Instead, those who took them probably experienced a long and agonizing. Cyanide works by blocking a cell's ability ATP. And this is a source of energy used by your body to perform a lot of natural functions regarding breathing and muscle usage. And when a person ingests a lethal dose of cyanide, the body's cells just suddenly stop producing ATP. So the muscle cells don't get the energy they need, and the person experiences all kinds of contractions. And he says here, your lungs, diaphragm, and heart are pure muscle. And when they can no longer function, you won't be able to breathe, so you get cardiac arrest. The length of time it takes for cyanide to kill a person ranges from around 2 to 5 minutes. And during this time frame, they're fully conscious and experience every bit of the chemical's effects. Cyanide acts fast because its molecules are tiny, allowing it to spread through the body rapidly and efficiently. But the guy says, on the other hand, a conscious death lasting 2 to 5 minutes will feel like an eternity for the affected person. So cyanide poisoning should be considered one of the world's least preferred ways of dying. It sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it? That you're laying there for minutes as this just absolute havoc is being wreaked on your body. And so that made me think more about these other kinds of substances that we fear putting to our bodies. And as I'm doing these experiments right now with my new portal open machine, I'll just tell you, one of the components that I am using for the machine is liquid mercury. And a lot of people fear liquid mercury, and they talk about not eating too many fish and stuff because you don't want to get mercury, and it's poisonous in various ways. So I figured I better learn more about this. And so when we come back from this break, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned about liquid mercury. Why is this pervasive? Why do fish have mercury in them? And how is this evolved so that it's such a dangerous thing? You have to be careful about it, especially if you're pregnant or something like that. And that will tie into some mystical elements of mercury, which will lead me to, well, one of the things that I've been wanting to bring up on this show for a while. An experiment, and I'm not going to do this, it's an experiment that's already been done, about whether or not we can measure life when someone dies. Is there some change there scientifically that we can look at that we've never looked at before? And we've got great technology now. It can do some amazing stuff. Maybe we need to start applying it in some different arenas of research. I'm Joshua P. Warren. You're listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. And I will be back after these important messages.
Hang in there. Josh is coming right back on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM. Paranormal Podcast Network. High Five Casino. High Five Casino is a social casino.
Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network.
High Five Casino is a social casino with real prizes and big Vegas hits at highfivecasino.com. The hottest games right from Vegas, and all winnings go straight to your bank account. Hundreds of exclusive games, free daily rewards, and come back to get free coins every 4 hours. Only at highfivecasino.com.
High Five Casino is a social casino. No purchase necessary. Void for and play responsibly. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details at high5casino.com. High Five Casino.
Hi, I'm Sandra Champlain. Please make sure and check out my show, Shades of the Afterlife, heard right here on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network.
Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. I'm your host, Joshua P. Warren, and this is the show where the unusual becomes usual. Yeah, I am incorporating some liquid mercury into one of my experiments right now, and I have to be careful. And I mean, how much do you really know about mercury? Well, mercury is a chemical element. Its symbol is Hg, atomic number 80. It is also known as quicksilver and was formerly named hydrargyrum. The Greek words hydror for water and argyos for silver. So that's why Hg is the symbol. And it's a heavy, silvery D-block element. Mercury is the only metallic element that is known to be liquid at standard temperature and pressure. It occurs in deposits throughout the world, mostly as cinnabar. And of course, we all know it's been used in thermometers, barometers, all kinds of valves, switches, fluorescent lamps. But you hear about the scary stuff all the time. You gotta be worried about mercury. And so I wanted to look into this and figure out, like, well, you hear if you eat too much fish, you might get too much mercury and it's bad for you. So where does all that mercury come from that ends up in fish? I didn't know. So I found some interesting articles. One of them is from foodprint.org, written by Peter Hanlon. And he talks about how especially expectant mothers and parents of young children know to limit certain seafood intake to avoid high levels of mercury. And he says mercury itself is not a boogeyman. It occurs naturally at low levels in rock, soil, and water throughout the world. But human activities have increased total mercury concentrations in the atmosphere by about 450% above natural levels, to dangerous levels for humans if it ends up in their systems in the wrong way. And he says, of the sources of the human-caused mercury emission, burning of fossil fuels like coal and gold mining are often responsible. And that once the mercury is in the atmosphere, it can travel for thousands of miles and then will eventually make its way into the oceans or large bodies of water, either by being deposited there or on land and getting washed downstream. And in this form, mercury poses little danger because living things can get rid of it quite quickly. But bacteria then convert this mercury as it sort of streams down toward the ocean and turns it into this highly toxic form called methylmercury. And then the food chain takes it from there. This gets absorbed by phytoplankton, little microscopic marine algae, and those things are eaten by larger plankton, and then those are eaten by little fish, and then those little fish are eaten by bigger fish, and they get eaten by bigger fish, and as it goes back up the food chain, these bigger fish start getting more of this mercury built up in their body. So the bigger the fish, the longer it lives and the more it eats, and larger fish accumulate a lot more of this methylmercury in their bodies. So the largest predatory fish in the sea, like sharks, swordfish, tuna, can have a lot of methylmercury concentration in their muscles. In some cases, it's 10 million times higher than those of the surrounding habitat. It's really interesting. And of course, he says, of course, who is higher than the largest fish on the food chain? Well, humans. So if you just follow the food chain, well, seafood is the source of nearly all the methylmercury that we acquire in our bodies. But it obviously has much more of a risk for fetuses, infants, children, growing brains, developing nervous systems. So how to reduce the intake? He says, first off, since fish, pretty much all fish contain at least traces of this, what you do is just be particular about what fish you eat and how much. Not to avoid seafood altogether, just to avoid seafood that's high on the food chain. So if you think back to this, the big fish eating the smaller fish, it makes sense to eat the fish or shellfish that are lower on the food chain, and you are bioaccumulating much less mercury. That's interesting, isn't it? And you can just think of the size of the fish and its position on the food chain and whether or not it's good or bad for you to eat it. And then, of course, I started wondering about, what happens if you do get mercury poisoning? Because there are these different forms of mercury, and some are worse than others. But basically, if you start accumulating too much mercury in your system, common symptoms are peripheral neuropathy. That means suddenly you start getting tingling and numbness in your extremities. It can also feel like an itching or a burning or a pain or even a sensation that resembles small insects crawling on or under your skin. You also get skin discoloration, like pink cheeks, fingertips, and toes, swelling, shedding and peeling of skin. Children may also have loss of hair, teeth, nails, sensitivity to light. And this stuff, it starts affecting your kidneys. And so if you don't pick up on the fact that you're getting this mercury, too much mercury in your system, long-term exposure to this, for your nervous system and your organs will lead to death, if not treated. So the good news is, it's not like if you break a vial of mercury and it splatters on you, you're a dead man. But you definitely have to be careful when you're working with this stuff. And one thing that I thought was especially interesting is that you've heard me talk about this before. I wrote about this in my book, The Secret Wisdom of Kukulkan, that when it comes to mercury in general, mercury, it seems to have a reputation for being something kind of magical, because rivers of it were found in this, or supposedly are in this tomb of this great Chinese emperor. Samples of this have been found in many pyramids around the world. They find them in these Mayan ball fields, and nobody can explain exactly even how it was refined and got there. If you look back at some of the ancient Hindu texts where they talk about the Vimanas, they supposedly had some type of swirling liquid mercury type substance that would be used so that these UFOs could fly around. I've talked before about Die Glocke, this device the Nazis were supposedly working on, shaped like a large metal bell that had these liquid mercury-like motors inside that would create some sort of some kind of anti-gravity effect. And also, when I was in Belize, I was talking to a Mayan descendant who said that it was not uncommon in the old days for a Mayan shaman to prove his worth by literally poking a little hole in one of his veins and dropping a little liquid mercury in there and letting it flow through his veins. And that if you didn't get sick and die, well, then you were a very powerful spiritual guide and shaman. And I don't know how often people live through that. But this is such an interesting subject because I do believe there's some connection between metaphysical phenomena, paranormal phenomena, and the manipulation of liquid mercury. And if you have never listened to episode 72 of this podcast called Strange Things, you must go do it. It's called One of the Wildest Stories I've Ever Heard. And it's about liquid mercury and about this place here in Nevada called, fittingly enough, Mercury, Nevada. And what a scientist told me about experiments they do with liquid mercury in order to turn it into a living being with a consciousness that sometimes escapes from the lab and they have to run out and chase it down, and it looks like, of all things, a big blue bunny. Now, how do we explain all this? I'm not sure, but isn't it interesting that we've gone from this idea of thinking about chemicals and chemistry and how it affects the body, leading us down this path toward mercury, and then a scientist saying, oh yeah, and by the way, you can take mercury and manipulate it a certain way and create a living being out of it. This is very weird stuff. And so as I'm experimenting with my new device, these things are running through my head. But when we come back from this break, I want to tell you about this experiment you've probably heard of to determine whether or not there is some physical life force that can be measured leaving the body right when you die. Yes, I'm talking about the 21 grams experiment. And some of my thoughts on that, the work done by Dr. Duncan McDougall. And what's this relationship between, mind, body, spirit, environment? What kind of role do chemicals possibly play in all this? What experiments can we do to find the connections? It's all too much, but it is strange. I'm Joshua P. Warren. You're listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network, and I will be right back.
Keep it here on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. The Wizard of Weird will be right back.
High Five Casino is a social casino with real prizes and big Vegas hits at highfivecasino.com. The hottest games right from Vegas, and all winnings go straight to your bank account. Hundreds of exclusive games, free daily rewards, and come back to get free coins every 4 hours. Only at highfivecasino.com.
High Five Casino is a social casino. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Play responsibly. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details at high5casino.com.
High Five Casino. Hi everyone, it's Savannah Guthrie and the topic for the Today Show. We love this time of year. There's so much to celebrate.
That's right, nobody does the holidays quite like today. All season long, join us for special performances with the brightest stars. Plus, festive recipes to whip up the perfect holiday feast and great deals on the hottest toys and gifts for everyone on your list. So join us every morning on NBC to make today your home for the holidays.
We are happy to announce that our Coast to Coast AM official YouTube channel has now reached over 300,000 subscribers. You can listen to the first hour of recent and past shows for free. So head on over to the coasttocoastam.com website and hit the YouTube icon at the top of the page. This is free show audio, so don't wait. coasttocoastam.com is where you want to be.
High Five Casino is a social casino with real prizes and big Vegas hits at highfivecasino.com. The hottest games right from Vegas, and all winnings go straight to your bank account. Hundreds of exclusive games, free daily rewards, and come back to get free coins every 4 hours. Only at highfivecasino.com.
High Five Casino is a social casino. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Play responsibly. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details at high5casino.com. High Five Casino.
Hey everyone, it's producer Tom with Coast to Coast AM, and more of the Wizard of Weird starts right now.
It's in the room.
Welcome back to the final segment of this edition of Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. I am your host, Joshua P. Warren. And you probably know that liquid mercury was used all the time in thermometers back in the day. Not so much anymore. Occasionally you'll still find a specialized laboratory thermometer that uses liquid mercury for one reason or another. And it's funny because I was thinking about that, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on this show before, but if I have, it was probably pretty fleeting. Of course, living here in Las Vegas, a couple of hours, I can be in Death Valley, California, where the highest record temperature was recorded 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 57 degrees Celsius back in 1913. So, yeah, 134 degrees Fahrenheit. And so, if you drive from Vegas to that part of California, you pass through Baker, California. And there you will find the world's tallest thermometer. This is a landmark there. It's like a roadside attraction. And because that temperature was 134 degrees, well, this thermometer on the side of the road is 134 feet tall. And it was built in 1991 by the Young Electric Sign Company for a man named Willis Baker. I'm sorry, a man named Willis Herron. He was a Baker businessman. And he had this restaurant called Bun Boy, apparently. And he spent $700,000, which is more like $1.5 million today, to build this thermometer. And it's fully functional. They have a gift shop there. And I bring this up because it's just such an obscure, like off-the-wall thing, the world's tallest thermometer, that I found out that at one point they had to pretty much like remodel or renovate this thing. It got damaged, winds blew it over, and so you actually can go and buy one of the light bulbs that was used, and the world's tallest thermometer. And so I went and I bought one, of course. It's part of my collection of weird things. Right next to a little statue of the world's tallest thermometer. Right next to a snow globe that has the world's tallest thermometer inside of it. And if you want to see that stuff, it's in the video that I shot recently. If you go to YouTube and just type in Joshua P. Warren, I have a channel, the Joshua P. Warren channel, and one of the recent videos is from late 2023, where I walked around and showed off some of the weird stuff in my personal collection, and part of it is world's largest thermometer stuff. But okay, getting back to this mystery about the connection between life and physical substances and physical energies. I'm sure you've probably heard that some people believe that the human soul weighs 21 grams. And in fact, let's see, what is 21 grams in ounces? That is, it's about 3/4 of an ounce. Okay, so that gives you an idea of maybe the weight. If you drink out of a shot glass, you know, imagine the shot glass is, I don't know, maybe like half full or something. But it refers to this experiment, this scientific study published in 1907 by Duncan McDougall, a physicist in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, he was actually a physician, not a physicist. And he hypothesized that souls have physical weight and attempted to measure the mass lost by a human when the soul departed the body. And he attempted to measure the mass change of 6 patients at the moment of death. He would put the person on a big scale of some kind and make sure that all the bodily fluids and everything else were captured on that scale, and then see what happened at the moment of death. And so he did this to 6 people, and apparently one of the 6 subjects lost 3/4 of an ounce, which is 21.3 grams. That's what he said. And he stated his experiment would have to be repeated many times before any conclusion could be obtained. And his experiment is widely regarded as flawed and unscientific due to the very small sample size, some of the methods used, and as well as the fact that only one of these 6 subjects met the hypothesis. So a lot of people say this is a case of selective reporting. But despite people within the scientific community rejecting this, his experiment popularized the concept that the soul has weight and that it weighs approximately 21 grams. Now, I have not heard of anybody in the modern era trying to reproduce such an experiment. And let's face reality here. Look, I understand all the problems doing this with humans, but we eat a lot of meat in this country every day. A lot of cows, a lot of chickens, a lot of turkeys, and obviously none of these slaughterhouses want to have cameras nearby. But this might be an opportunity. I believe that an animal has a soul or a spirit, if a human does. Some people disagree with that. I think that there's no difference biologically that should determine that we have something that they don't. And so I think it would be interesting to see this kind of thing reproduced with animals. But I mean, I'm not talking killing animals. I mean, if you're going to kill an animal anyway, if you're in a slaughterhouse and you're going to do it anyway, is it possible to incorporate this experiment? But is it also possible that you could do the same thing with plants? A plant is a living thing. Does a plant have a soul or a spirit? Can you measure something leading a plant? Now, that would be very, very minuscule. But, you know, we have such technology now that I feel that, well, like, for example, I have this high-speed camera that can shoot something like, I believe it's 1,000 frames per second. So not too long ago, I pointed this camera at the sky over Vegas, and I just shot like a 3-second clip, and then afterward, I captured 2 UFOs zipping around that were moving too fast for the human eye to see. Because that's what happens with a high-speed camera. It slows things down into a range so that you can see them.
It's crazy.
And I think it would be interesting to just take a high-speed camera and just clip some plants and see if there's something that shows up. Can you think of any other types of cameras that haven't been used to try to capture some vision of the human spirit or the plant spirit or any of this stuff? I wonder about that. I wonder if it's been done, but it's been too controversial, and so it gets done behind closed doors. Let me squeeze in a listener email. I will not use this man's name. He says, I live in Maryland, and he is a personal trainer and musician. He says, I am having negative energy in the house, and I feel there is something behind it that's very detrimental to me and my wife. She's from Honduras. We smudged the house with traditional sage, etc. And I asked its name tonight. I tried to open up communication, and something that came through very clear was Obazu. Obazu. He says, never heard before. And he says, now, this thing called Pazuzu possessed me when I was 14 in a classroom, and chairs flew around the room, and the chalkboard was filled with ancient Hebrew from end of the days, and this is by no means some joke. I thought this was way behind me, and I want to have a family with my wife. Will you please consider helping me? I listen to you and respect you so much. Can I beat this thing or not? Well, let me just say that here's the reality. Well, Zozo is a name that, of course, Darren Evans talked about being some kind of a demonic force, and I just really don't know if we're talking about the same thing. I know Pazuzu goes back to the Exorcist movie. It's been fictionalized, but I gave him the same advice that I'll give anybody who listens to this. I did a podcast all about how to prevent or create paranormal activity. It's episode 11 of this podcast called Strange Things. If you think that you're having some issues, and I'm not a Ghostbuster, I'm not an exorcist, but if you think you're having an issue, or if you have a friend who's having an issue, go listen to episode 11 of this show, Strange Things. It's totally free. But one of the best things we can all do is try to end the show together with a positive mindset. Take a deep breath, relax. Here is the Good Fortune Tom. That's it for this edition of the show. Follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren. Plus, visit joshuapwarren.com to sign up for my free e-newsletter to receive a free instant gift, and check out the cool stuff in the Curiosity Shop, all at joshuapwarren.com. I have a fun one lined up for you next time, I promise. So please tell all your friends to subscribe to this show and to always remember the golden rule. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious. And I will talk to you again soon. You've been listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network.
Well, if you like this episode of Strange Things, wait till you hear the next one. Thank you for listening to the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network.
High Five Casino is a social casino with real prizes and big Vegas hits at highfivecasino.com. The hottest games right from Vegas, and all winnings go straight to your bank account. Hundreds of exclusive games, free daily rewards, and come back to get free coins every 4 hours. Only at highfivecasino.com.
High Five Casino is a social casino. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Play responsibly. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details at high5casino.com. High Five Casino.
The holidays are here, and so is the IKEA winter
winter sale. Now's your chance to make the holidays a little more magical and less expensive. Save up to 50% off on select items in-store and online now through January 7th. Plus, IKEA loyalty members get an extra 10% off on sale items. And if you spend $2.99 or more on a single order before December 10th, enjoy free delivery. Need help managing the clutter of decorations? IKEA Storage Solutions will keep your home tidy from toys and tinsel. Having extra guests over? Check out offers on select dining furniture to make more room for the people who matter most this time of year. Don't wait to finish your winter wish list. Shop the IKEA Winter Sale in-store or online now until January 7th. Visit IKEA-USA.com/winter sale for more details. Terms apply. Offer valid dates may vary. U.S. only while supplies last. Selection may vary by store and online. See store and IKEA-USA.com/winter sale for complete terms. Restrictions apply.
Macy's is your one-stop shop for everything merry and bright. From the perfect gifts to delicious feast, we've got you covered. Find fresh ingredients for family dinners, delightful desserts to share, and even holiday meal kits to make hosting.
Hi everyone, it's Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb from the Today Show. Nobody does the holidays like today. From festive performances and great gift ideas to tips for the perfect holiday feast. Join us every morning on NBC and make today your home for the holidays.
At Smith's, shop Kroger brand products for all of your favorite things this holiday season. Because our proven quality products come at exceptionally low prices. And with a money-back quality guarantee, every dish is sure to be a favorite. From sweet sugar cookies and holiday ham to that perfect slice of pie. Whether you shop delivery, pickup, or in-store, Kroger brand has all your favorite things. Smith's, fresh for everyone.
Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino with no download required. You can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms.
Welcome to the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. This is the place to be if you're ready for the best podcasts of the paranormal. Curious and sometimes unexplained. Now listen to this.
Welcome to our podcast. Please be aware the thoughts and opinions expressed by the host are their thoughts and opinions only and do not reflect those of iHeartMedia, iHeartRadio, Coast to Coast AM, employees of Premier Networks, or their sponsors and associates. We would like to encourage you to do your own research and discover the subject matter for yourself.
Show, I'll be bringing you brand new, mind-blowing content, news, exercises, and weird experiments you can do at home, and a lot more. On this edition of the program, secrets to unlock your inner genius. How good does that sound? Now, this is one of those topics that actually can become quite complex and deep. So it's a challenge to talk about it, but I like a challenge. So here we go. What do you think of when you hear the word genius? Do you just think of an intelligent person who makes good decisions? Or do you think of maybe an almost supernaturally intelligent person? Someone who has an encyclopedic brain, lots of data stored in there, that kind of thing. Or do you think of a genius as being a person who is almost like a channel, who sometimes receives a flash of insight. You know what they call like a flash of genius. Insight beyond everyone else that just seems to come out of nowhere. Well, if we just look at the basic definition of genius at the almighty Wikipedia, it says genius is a characteristic of original and exceptional insight in the performance of some art or endeavor that surpasses expectations, sets new standards for the future, establishes better methods of operation, or remains outside the capabilities of competitors. And then it basically goes on to say, there is no scientifically precise definition of genius. They talk about some experts who have studied this, and according to one expert, it says the most common trait that actually defines a genius may be the extraordinary ability to apply creativity and imaginative thinking to almost any situation. Wow, so it's kind of rough around the edges. I think we might overuse the word genius, though. I've always sensed that. You hear people say, oh, look, it's this I don't want to point anybody out, but like an actor or a singer, whether a songwriter or some, even people who work with very technical engineering things. This is a genius, but is a genius really somebody who comes up directly with his or her own material, or somebody who can go out and organize a team of people to come up with, I mean, like, there are all kinds of different ways to look at this. So you might be surprised to find that if you go back to some of the earliest thoughts and earliest references to genius, that there are almost like two very different versions, because what I just gave you here is something that's sort of related to what we think of in the modern days, the modern time, as what a genius might be. But if you go back thousands of years, the ancient Romans, they used the word genius in a similar way, but a very different way, at least different compared to how we feel about that word now. I mean, what I'm about to share with you, if you don't know this, I mean, it seems really weird these days. In the Roman religion, the genius is the individual instance of a general divine nature that is present in every individual person, place, or thing. Now, that's kind of interesting right off the bat, because before I continue, I was just saying that in the modern day, we use the word genius, and sometimes they're like, well, come on, that person's not a genius, because maybe this person didn't live up to this expectation. But the Romans, they actually felt that every person had a genius. But what exactly does that mean? Well, it goes on to say here that much like a guardian angel, the genius would follow each man, and man, woman, you know how it goes, from the hour of birth until the day of death. Okay, so now we're talking about something that seems almost like a companion spirit. And this companion spirit is there to sort of guide you and help you in certain ways, but it gets weirder than that. If we go back and we look at the origin of this word, they say that the Latin origin goes back to household guardian spirit, also innate power of a clan or a tribe or a people. And as I mentioned, the Romans felt that not only people had a genius, but a location has a genius. They called it genius loci, or loci. I don't know how you pronounce it. But let me try to give you an example of how the Romans felt about this. There, in early Roman literature, there was this writer named Plautus, and he's describing how one character is making fun of another character. And he says, your father is so greedy that he uses cheap wares and goods and sacrifices to his own genius so as not to tempt the genius to steal it. Okay, so that was their idea of how to incorporate this concept into a joke. And it says, in that passage, you can see the genius is not identical to the person, because that joke wouldn't make sense. However, the genius has the same character as the person, the implication being like person, like genius. See, this is really weird stuff. So it's kind of like that you have, again, maybe some kind of a guardian angel type figure there that's connected with you for life, and it has a lot of your characteristics, but it actually is its own separate being as well. And so there are certain powers that you can get from the genius, which are, sort of supernatural moments, because you're kind of channeling the genius through you, which is why you kind of behave like the genius. So in this case, it's like, well, your dad's so greedy, I guess his genius is greedy, and so he's, hiding stuff from his own genius, so his genius won't steal it. I told you this was going to get kind of weird and complicated, so hopefully you find this interesting, because it's one of those things you have to just sort of try to envision as some kind of a model. Like, here's how I was thinking of it. I've talked before on this show about the idea of creating something like a minion. And a minion is where you create a character that you project from your mind, sort of like a tulpa, and you give it a job to do, and you envision that it is a separate, independent being. A servitor is what some people would also call it. And then once you do that, you treat it as if it's a different being that's doing a task, and it's working with you, and you're helping each other, and you do make sacrifices to it and that kind of thing. And even though it's separate from you, you did create it. So it is, in essence, a part of you as well. So think if you are kind of like this, you are one half of this being, and the half that we see is what we call the human. But your twin here next to you that we can't see is your genius that's following you around all the time. And so the genius has a lot of your qualities and vice versa. And so we each have the ability to tap into the power of that genius and channel it. And this is a whole other way of envisioning something like a soul or a spirit, and how that thing can enhance your intelligence and your ability to succeed or fail in the world. Now, when we come back from our break here, I'm going to share with you this really, I think, obscure bit of knowledge. It's a technique that I learned when I was a kid that will allow you to tap into a part of your brain and, I think, pull off some really surprising feats, things that surprise people so much. I used to get up in front of class at school and perform this like I was performing a magic trick, and people would just be in awe. And it has to do with tying into this whole idea of, like, what is a genius and how can you unlock something in your brain? I know it's a weird show, but it's called Strange Things. And by the way, you know what? Sometimes I decide to just go to subscribers at my free e-newsletter, and I say, guess what? I'm giving $500 to the first person who replies to this email. And I do it. And everybody who doesn't know me says, oh, he's been hacked. But no, I haven't been hacked. I do it. You got to have PayPal or Zelle or something like that. And I do stuff like that. I send out all kinds of free goodies. I invite you to participate in experiments online with me that are a lot of fun. And I'm going to be doing a bunch of that coming up very soon this year. But you got to subscribe to my free e-newsletter. And when you do that, you'll instantly receive an automated newsletter or an automated email from me with links to some free online gifts, just like a free digital good luck charm. So do it right now, joshuapwarren.com, and on the homepage, you'll see where you put in your email address, hit the submit button. It takes 2 seconds, and you'll be subscribing to the newsletter. I am Joshua P. Warren, and you're listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. And I will be right back.
Hang on, Josh will be right back.
Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino with no download required. You can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms.
The following ad is sponsored by Pets Best Insurance Services. Your pet is your bestie. Your therapist, your preferred match. It's easy to love them, even when they sneak your snacks. It's easy to protect them too, with pet insurance coverage from Pets Best. Because it's all fun and games until they chew on something they shouldn't. With perfect timing, Pets Best helps protect your furry friend and your budget from this imperfect world. Get up to 90% on eligible vet bills for less than $1 a day. Find your perfect match at PetsBest.com. Pet insurance products offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company or Independence American Insurance Company. For all terms, visit PetsBest.com/policy.
Okay, folks, we need your music. Hey, it's producer Tom at Coast to Coast AM, and every first Sunday of the month, we play music from emerging artists just like you. If you're a musician or a singer and have recorded music you'd like to submit, it's very...
Till the next time, everyone. Thanks for watching. Likes.